morning, everyone. Ring the Liberty Bell for the beginning of our meeting. And I will turn it over to the Toastmaster, who is also me. So it's an easy switch over. Shake my hand. All right. So our theme today is the right to violate rights. And the longer explanation to that went, to be a leader, you must make decisions which distinguish between what are the natural rights of the individual versus the violation of rights by the establishment of collective entitlements. Let's think about what it means to say the right to violate rights. What is a right? To use Ayn Rand's definition, it's a moral principle defining and sanctioning man's freedom of action in a social context. How about violate? What does it mean to violate something? Well, dictionary.com says it's to break or pass by force or without right. Without right. So when you think of the definition of these two terms, doesn't it seem oxymoronic to think that someone could have a right to break by force and without right the rights of another? Just doesn't make any sense, does it? As a moral principle, that means it's a metric by which to judge. But what is it that's being judged? Does it sustain or enhance life or destroy it? For example, denying someone's freedom of action, remembering Ayn Rand's definition, is denying that person their life, or at least their ability to sustain or enhance it, which is indirectly denying them their life. And denying someone the right to what they produced or were given to them freely by another is to deny their right to sustain or enhance their life by exploitation of that property. So is it right to demand a right to an Obama phone? Public transportation? Food stamps? Section 8 housing? Obamacare? Whose freedom of action is being violated by the existence of these programs? The demander of these services? Or the slave who is forced to produce them? By what right do they demand such rights? What have they done to earn such a right to such free things? Oh, that's right. They have the right to demand these things precisely because they have earned nothing. They have produced nothing. They have done nothing. This is really the destruction of the term rights. Let me give a real-life example. We'll take it down a notch or two from the political aspect. This past week, I was at a conference in San Jose, and my company sponsored the lunch for the conference attendees on Wednesday. Of course, you get to have an advertisement during that lunch for the cost, for the benefit of sponsoring it. I was the one that gave the presentation at that lunch, and it was to about 260 people, over 250 people at that lunch. Now, did I have the right in this context, or my company, to demand that the audience sit through the entirety of my speech? Wouldn't that be called false imprisonment or kidnapping to do that? A violation of rights? Did I have a right to demand applause from the audience and laughter at the humorous points when I made them during the speech? Well, even if I did, that's another act of coercion. What satisfaction would that provide me? Knowing that they were forced to do it, I'd have no clue as to whether or not it was really funny or a good and effective speech. Would it be better or worse if the audience was forced to sit and watch me stand before them for 30 minutes? 30 minutes was the length of my speech. I don't know exactly how long. While I produced nothing. I just stood there. Said nothing, was motionless, had no facial or body gestures. In fact, to tie it back to the previous discussion on a political level, isn't that exactly what the people who get welfare services did to earn them? Nothing. In fact, I give a lot of credit to Toastmasters because my speech actually was fantastic. Probably the best one I've ever done. Seriously, and this comes from multiple forms of feedback that I received. But did I or my company have the right to such positive feedback? Could we force people to come to our booth in the exhibit hall after that speech and ask about products and solutions I talked about in that speech? Did I have the right to force people to come up to me afterwards and give me compliments later that day and even into the next day? I did not. But it was gratifying to me that both those things actually did happen. I stood there in our booth, and I had people come up to me, and I heard them coming up to other colleagues working in the booth, asking about things that I talked about in that lunch presentation. I had people that I know and didn't know, colleagues in my company and outside of my company, compliment my speech afterwards. My goal was to do a better speech than the keynote presenter made. Fortunately, the CEO of a competing company did a horrible job. It wasn't even close. To assert the right to violate rights is nothing but nihilism. To assert the right to violate rights directly or indirectly via advocacy of welfare programs, individual or corporate level, is really to destroy the concept of rights. And that's the means to the end of destroying man. Because it is a moral principle, moral principles giving us the guide of what is good for life, what sustains and what enhances life. And therefore, to destroy a concept of a moral principle is to destroy mankind. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my monologue for today.